Welcome to Philosophy for Flourishing. I'm John Hersey, and I'm here with Craig Biddle. And today we're going to talk about writing effectively in defense of liberty. This is a really important topic. Anyone who values liberty, right now is the time to learn how to defend it. Of course, the political climate right now is terrible. No good options in sight. The culture is in flames, and those who really care about preserving the ideals that America was founded on and resuscitating them need to learn how to communicate effectively about those ideas and really move hearts and minds. So that's what we want to talk about today.
Yeah, let me add an important point here about writing, and that is that writing really is the most organized form of thinking. Right? Learning to write well is learning to think well. It's learning to think slowly and carefully so that you get your ideas in order and you get your concretes that are going to support the points that you want to make, the examples or the statistics or the quotations or whatever, that you get them all organized in your mind and then on paper so that other people can consume that, right? And really come to understand this thing that you understand. And that process of slow, deliberate, organized thinking, which is really what writing amounts to, is so important today because almost nobody grasps the moral and philosophic case for liberty. And the few people who do grasp it, objectivists and a few sort of fellow travelers, among them, very few people can communicate them well. And this is really what we need to do if we want to win this culture war, right? You point out, John, the problems with politics today, how nasty the political situation is. Well, that's a direct consequence of the cultural context of what's going on in the culture. As Andrew Breitbart famously said, politics is downstream from culture. But culture is downstream from other things, right? It's downstream from education, particularly early childhood education, but on through college as well. It's downstream from philosophy, the kinds of ideas that people already have in their minds, constitute ultimately the culture, right? We have, if people are accepting altruism as morally correct, then we're going to have a culture that accepts that broadly and acts accordingly, and then we're going to have a political situation and context that does the same. So you have to understand, you have to use Steve Jobs' word, you have to grok, right? The underlying principles that actually support a culture of freedom. And then in addition to that, you've really got to learn how to communicate clearly. Now, you've been working at the Objective Standard, our sister publication, for a few years now and been working with a whole lot of writers. Why don't you tell listeners a little bit about what we go through there over at TOS to ensure that the pieces that we publish have this kind of clarity and depth?
Yeah, definitely. I also want to just make a quick point about writing being the most organized form of thinking. I've noticed that even in any other form of communication, if I've gone through the thinking to first organize my thoughts on paper, then it's far easier to get up and speak those ideas. So there are a lot of people that think, well, the book is dead, or even the blog is dead to some extent. Everything is video and everything is audio or podcast, like what we're doing now. Well, to whatever extent that's true, it doesn't change the fact that, as you said, writing is the most organized form of thinking. And if you can write clearly, it will help you think more clearly and help you ultimately communicate more clearly. So in terms of what we do to get pieces ready and published for the Objective Standard, it largely depends on the quality, the content of the things that are submitted. But the end goal is to reach a standard, and Craig, you taught me this. You taught me this acronym when I came on board, ITEC, important, which stands for important, true, essentialized, and clear. And the goal with every article that comes in is to meet those standards and to meet them as well as we possibly can. And that requires going through every word of a piece and asking, is this true? Is this important? Is this clear? Is this as essentialized as it possibly can be? Ayn Rand famously identified what she called a crow epistemology. And basically, this was an identification of the fact that we have only a limited amount of bandwidth at the level of conscious awareness, and we can only retain so much. So when we're looking at a piece, one of the things that we're looking at is, okay, does this piece attempt to make a single clear and important point? If it's trying to do more than that, then it's trying to do too much. You simply can't communicate more than one important point in an article. So a lot of times it's stepping back and asking, okay, what is the theme of this piece, and is it sticking to that theme, and is it following the most logical path for demonstrating it? And if it's not, then that's really doing a disservice to the reader. It's sort of like we think of a theme being the point that you're trying to get across to the reader, and an outline being your plan for getting that point across to the reader, as similar to a destination and the directions for getting there. And just as you wouldn't, if you were to ask for directions from a stranger, you're in a new place, you're trying to go somewhere, well, you would not appreciate some sort of long digression on the state of retailers or restaurants in the area, because by the time you get to the next direction, you've lost everything that has come before that. So what you need is just a very clear, concise, to the point set of directions. And that's what readers need to grasp your point in writing as well. So those are some of the things that we look at. And I think the acronym that you came up with, ITEC, ITEC, is one of the key tools that we use to ensure that we can produce quality articles on a regular basis and really help move hearts and minds.
Yeah, we go through that acronym as part of our writing courses over at OSI. And it's one of the many things that we do in those writing courses, but we break it down. But I want to focus a little bit on the element that you were just talking about, which is really the essentialized part of it. So it's important, true, essentialized, and clear. We're looking for all these things, but the essentialization aspect is something that a lot of particularly objectivist writers have difficulty with. And there's good reason for that, because we know that everything's connected some way or another, right? And we have all these connections, and you start writing and it's very easy to say, oh, this connects to that. And you kind of, go down a rabbit hole over there, and then you're like, oh, and this connects to that. And you can very quickly turn what otherwise would have been a streamlined article trying to get one point across into a complete overload of the crow, to use the analogy you pointed out earlier, just an overload of the bandwidth that a person can use at any given time. And one of the things that I know you spend a lot of time with the writers at TOS on, and I do too, is helping people to understand, look, if you're trying to accomplish too much in an article, if you're making too many connections in an article, not only do you blow the crow and so that the person can't really retain it, but they're not going to come back and want to read more either, because they don't walk away with, oh my God, that really, I got this one point really clear, so I want to come back and read more from this writer, right? And so you gain nothing if you try to pack too much into a piece, if there's a bunch of fat in there. If, on the other hand, you cut out all the fat, and you just keep that one point that you're trying to get into the reader's head. You're not trying to change somebody's whole philosophy in a single short article. You can't do that. That's just would be a wrong goal. But if you can move the needle, or just get somebody to move one notch up in their thinking on a given subject, that's a home run in a 700, 1,500 word article somewhere in there, if you can make that happen, right? If you can get somebody to just question whether altruism is really legitimate, whether it really makes sense, the idea that being moral, consistent, self-sacrificially serving others. Or if you can make someone start to challenge a preconceived notion that he came to the article with, such as that rideshare companies should be forced to convert their contractors into employees, right? To focus in on an article that was just recently published by somebody who took one of our courses, Maggie Bird, published that wonderful piece pointing out the injustice of that. And if you can get a reader to just say, hey, I never thought about that way before. She really makes a strong point here that that it's unfair, not only to the rideshare companies, but also to their employees. And basically, it's just unjust in general. It's a bad thing for the government to get between a company and its contractors and say you can't do business together that way. So that's one of the things that we spend so much time on is getting people to understand, look, don't try to change the world in a single article. Try to move a mind in a single article, just a notch or two, just move that needle a bit. And if you do, not only do you get that out of it, not only do your readers get that benefit from your writing, they also start to like your writing. And they come back for more because they know they're going to get more of that same kind of thing. Over time, this really builds up and people start to get your whole philosophical framework. They're like, oh my goodness, John or Maggie or whomever seems to have this framework that always makes sense. What's going on here, right? And this is a way that we can get people into the kinds of philosophical depth that they really need if they want to understand the big picture and sort of, become join the fray, so to speak. So.
Yeah, one of the things you mentioned, and I think we've been talking about, is one of the key things about clear writing is having a single idea that you're trying to get across. And one of the writers that you introduced me to, William Zinsser, wrote a book called On Writing Well. And he said that clutter is the disease of American writing. He's got this, he goes on, he's got this great quote that I'd love to read because I think it's such a gem and can teach someone so much about writing in such short order. So I'm going to go ahead and read it now. And we can talk more about how we apply some of the ideas in this, both in the course and in editing at TOS. Okay. So this is from his book On Writing Well. And he says, we are a society strangling in unnecessary words, circular constructions, pompous frills, and meaningless jargon. Our national tendency is to inflate and thereby sound important. But the secret of good writing is to strip every sentence to its cleanest components. Every word that serves no function, every long word that could be a short word, every adverb that carries the same meaning that's already in the verb, every passive construction that leaves the reader unsure of who is doing what. These are the 1,001 adulterants that weaken the strength of a sentence. I love this quote because he captures so much, like I said, in this one thing. He's talking about not overloading the crow, not overloading your reader with too many elements, not trying to sound important or to sound smart, but just to plainly state what it is you're trying to say. We call it academies when we get articles submitted to us or we read them elsewhere, where the entire thing is in passive voice. You're not sure who's doing what. And every other word is something you've got to look up. I mean, this doesn't move minds. This doesn't even communicate to people. It's totally unclear. I'd encourage everyone to both take the course, but also if you're interested in really having an impact on people with a written word or even the spoken word, because all this stuff applies there as well. Go check out William Zinsser's On Writing Well. It's a beautiful book on writing. It's a lot of fun from beginning to end, and you'll pick up so many great lessons that you can apply both in writing and in speaking.
Yeah, that's a good recommendation, but I also want to add a caution to the business of reading books about writing, because I have a friend, in fact, I probably have more than one friend, but I got one in mind, who wanted to be a writer, and he kept reading books about writing, thinking that he was going to learn how to write that way. And the fact is, you don't learn how to write that way. You learn how to write by writing. And you learn how to write by writing a lot and by reviewing that regularly with people who can help you think about what's going on in it, and then doing more and writing some articles that are just awful and you have to throw them away. And then eventually, after you stumble through this long writing process, you get a few really good ones published. And it's a messy process. And you have to actually engage in the writing in order to get any value out of a book like Zinsser's. Because if you just read, this friend of mine, literally, I think he's read every great book on writing, and he's written almost nothing. And it reminds me back when I used to make furniture for a living, I knew people in that field also who would spend all day sharpening their tools and making sure that all their equipment worked just perfectly and everything. And they never made any furniture or whatever it was they were supposed to be making. So I agree with you on the recommendation, but the thing I'd really like to encourage people to do is I know you're starting a new cohort of the course, How to Write Powerfully in Defense of Liberty. Does it start next week or the week after?
Starts on November 3rd.
November 3rd, okay. And what you do in that, and I won't be with you in this one, but I've taught some of these in the past, and what we do in these courses is we do hands-on real writing. We walk the entire class through the entire writing process from the beginning where you don't even know what you're going to write about, to getting some ideas down on paper about some things that you might want to write about, to formulating from that a possible theme, to then formulating a couple of different kinds of outlines that can help you to determine maybe some organization of these ideas around that theme. And then you might change the theme again, like there's some, back and forth along the way. And then you go through the drafting, and you go through the editing and the various stages of editing. And by the end, through this fairly complex process, and you actually arrive at a viable article, an article that could be, that could be published somewhere conceivably. And what we teach in that class, and I know you'll be teaching this in the one you're going to start on the 3rd, is how not only how to do this process and the order in which to do it, but how to make sure that you stay focused at each stage of the process just on the one thing that you need to be doing there, right? Because one of the things that people don't realize is that writing it's uncomfortable all the way through the process. And if you don't know that, and if you're not expecting that, you kind of just feel like, well, everything I put down here is just not good. Where's that beautiful article that's supposed to, that writers are supposed to be able to produce? You don't get to that thing unless you're willing to be patient with yourself and with the process, and unless you understand all of those elements of the process and take your time going through it. And the way that we teach these courses is so much better than just like reading about this stuff, because you do it hands-on, you get real-time feedback, you come back for more, you hear the feedback that's given to other students in the class, and the kinds of conversations that come up about certain aspects of writing in real time as the questions are being asked. It's so valuable. And the feedback that we've been getting from people who have taken these classes is just testament to this fact, because they get through it and they're like, oh my goodness, I had no idea that you could just do it this way with this series of steps and that it actually works. So that's a long way of saying, yes, go read Zinzer's book. And I would also recommend read Ayn Rand's fabulous book, The Art of Nonfiction, another really, really good book that boils down some of the essentials. But you got to write too. So anyone out there who wants to really get into writing in defense of liberty, or writing in general, but I think it's really interesting to join a course where you've got a particular idea you're trying to advance, and all of the other students in the course are trying to advance that same idea. It helps you to learn how to focus and get deep on a particular subject. And there's almost a magical element that comes out of that, because people leave the course not only with a bunch of information about writing, but with a much deeper understanding of what it means to defend liberty.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you brought it up, that you cannot just read books and hope to become a better writer. It's kind of like if someone were to read every manual for flying an airplane and then to call himself a pilot.
Yeah.
You cannot learn to fly by reading airplane manuals.
Yeah.
And to be honest, we can't even really teach you how to write. We can teach you principles and practices for applying those principles. But what it comes down to is actually doing the work of the writing. And the part that I love most about this course is where I see people grow the most is once they've taken that step, they've formulated a clear theme, they've come up with an outline, they've drafted an article. At each part of the process, we get to give individualized feedback as to how you can improve the thing that you've done. And that's where we see the gears turning, the key in the lock, doors opening up, and people just grasping so much so quickly about writing. You mentioned Maggie Bird earlier. She had never written an article. She'd never tried to write a nonfiction article and get published until she took our course. She just decided, I'm going to take this course. I'm interested in writing in defense of freedom. And as you mentioned, she published with us a great article on rideshare companies. And I recommend that everybody goes to check that out, because it's pretty remarkable that somebody with no writing experience could, in a month's time, come up with that. And
another article, we just published that article by Dr. Stephen Cornweiss, who took our writing course. Did he take he took the advanced writing course, because I think he had already done some work with you, but he hadn't been published yet. He hadn't completed an article. He had been trying to write some articles, and he was running into some walls with the process. And he took our advanced writing class, the advanced writing workshop, and he just published, what was it, two days ago, I guess. He published this piece on HCQ, really complicated research piece that just reads like butter, right? I mean, it took one of the most difficult topics out there, really, really controversial topic even, and wrote about it in this very fair, even-handed way that's just so clear. I remember when you guys told me you were editing that, and I heard what the subject was, and I think I told you, I was like, oh, I'm really worried about this. That's a thorny topic, and this is his first article. I just don't. And it came to me for my edits, and I was astonished. I finished the article. I was like, oh my God, that's so nicely written and so clear. So, this process works, and it's not difficult to learn. You have to commit, though. It's not writing is always difficult in a certain respect, because it always requires a lot of thought. You have to think hard, and you have to focus hard, and you have to concentrate, right? And so it never gets easy in the sense that you don't have to do those difficult things. What it does do, if you understand the process, is you can get to a point where you're like, okay, I know it's difficult, but I also know how to do this thing one step at a time. And I know at each stage, I know what the purpose of that stage is. And all I've got to do is achieve that particular purpose, right? The purpose of formulating a theme is just to get the one idea that I want the reader to grasp by the end of the article into a single grammatical sentence, right? That's the purpose. Once you have that, then your theme enables you to say, okay, what points would I have to marshal and get the reader to understand in order to grasp this theme? So the theme allows you to go to the next stage, which is to start what we call a funnel outline, which is, I won't get into the details of that now, but the funnel outline is really helpful because it's a stage between a normal ordinal outline and the theme. And it's a stage that's really important because it frees your mind to stop worrying about the order of the ideas and to just focus on which ideas would you have to understand to grasp this thing, right? And once you're done with that stage, then you know that your next stage, the ordinal outline, is just to put these things in an order that would make sense given what they're, right? And so on. Each stage of the process, you know exactly what your goal is. And because of that, you get small achievements or accomplishments along the way, which help to fuel and keep you motivated, right? So you don't feel constantly frustrated. And, you know, once you get that and you get through, you know, granted, it's never easy in the sense of it, you don't have to think, but it does become simple in the sense that, or simpler, in the sense that although it's a complex process with many parts, you're only focusing on one part at a time. And you know exactly how to go through that and what to do to get to the next step. That makes all the difference to me. And I think that that's what people are seeing in these courses is that that methodical step-by-step approach changes everything for people.
It turns it into a bit of a game because, like you said, there are just separate steps, and each part of the process, your goal is very delimited and very simple, but not easy. And you know, one of the things that is interesting about writing, and you know, about doing it as a career, in most careers, a lot of what you do becomes automatized, and there are aspects of writing and editing that become automatized. But if you think about it, a writer's job is to create a new product every single time they sit down to write a piece. Imagine any other field if every day your goal was to create a new product.
Yeah.
You never stop the product creation process. And what it takes, it takes the process, it takes understanding the process, and you lubricate the wheels over time and get that going. But it also takes a lot of grit. And I think that the grit that you learn from the writing process, you manifest a certain perseverance to get through it. And that helps you. Not only does writing help you in the aspect of clarifying your thinking, but it also helps you persevere in other things because you understand what clear thinking is, so you can muster that thinking and achieve that level of clarity in other things. And you are also willing to persevere to get through in other things. So I think, Steve Kornweiss, who wrote that article on hydroxychloroquine, could attest to this. I mean, that was, that's a huge achievement, but it was sort of like, going through a war or climbing Mount Everest or something.
Yeah, absolutely. He finishes that article, and now he's really equipped to talk about it as well. He could be on a podcast or talk show and be extremely knowledgeable and helpful to other people beyond what's in that article, right? In order to write anything coherently, you've got to know a lot more than what's going down on that page. I remember when I wrote my first book, Loving Life. The amount of learning that I had to do in the process, before and in the process of writing that book, to write it was just massive. And indeed, the earlier drafts of that book were 4 times the length of the final product at various times. And the reason is you have to know a lot to say a little really coherently about something. But this is another point where you want to say yes, but, because there's a warning here. A lot of people think, oh, I've got to become a complete expert on X subject before I can say a word about it at all, right? And that's not true. So I don't want that implication to come out of my point that by writing something or in order to write something, you've got to know a lot more about it. That is true. But it doesn't mean you have to be a world expert on the subject in order to write a short article about the subject. All you need to know is enough more than your audience knows so that you can convey something to them that helps them to come up a level or two in their knowledge or their understanding, right? And if you've got that, and if you know that that's your only goal, is to just bring them up that level, then you can write about topics that you're not necessarily, the world expert on, but you have substantial knowledge on. And this is another thing I think keeps people from diving into writing. They think, oh, I've got to become an expert in a field before I can say anything about it. And granted, it's great to be an expert in a field. You can say a lot more about it when you get there. But the way that people become experts in a field is by doing a whole lot of reading about it and a whole lot of writing about it, particularly in an intellectual field. I mean, you're the only way you're really going to become an expert as an intellectual is to write. There's no other way to do it. You're sitting around reading books and having conversations and listening to tapes or recordings or whatever. It's never going to make you as deep a thinker and as coherent and as articulate on a given subject as writing. There's just no other way to get there. So back to my first book. By the time I was done with that book, having done all of this, just insanely difficult for me, at least, it was really difficult for me to do the thinking and all the research I had to do and try to organize these ideas. I got done with that book and I knew that material like the back of my hand, and I still do. Now, granted, I'm constantly using that material and building on it, so it's not like I learned it and then left it be. But when you do that, as Stephen just did with his article, that really becomes, the material becomes welded to your soul, right? And it's there for recall when and as needed. And it comes up, really, really nicely for you when you've gotten it well organized that way in your mind and on paper. So there's just so many values. So, for anyone has ever thought about trying to write, I'll say a few words about the value of being a writer in your life. Hey, we've already talked about the way in which it helps you to become an organized thinker. But I want to balance the fact that we've talked about how it can be a frustrating process, or it's a difficult process no matter what, right? And you really do. You have to work hard to be a writer. But the rewards are amazing. The rewards are amazing. When you publish something and it really does help other people to see something more clearly and to really understand something that they didn't understand before. You get mail about this, right? You write a good letter or a good article and publish it, and you start getting email about it. And people say, thank you so much. This really helped to clarify that for me. And that's part of the reward, because that's what we're trying to do as writers, or at least as nonfiction writers. We're trying to clarify things for people and make them and help them to understand something that we grasp. And so even though, and it's, writing I still find very difficult for me. It's hard. I have to turn my brain on full power and really concentrate. I don't find that easy ever. But when I do it and I finish a piece and I get that mail and people say, thanks so much, you really helped me, it goes right to the soul, And so if anyone who wants to try writing and to try to get to where you get some of this kind of reward, it's really worth it. And if you sign up for this course John's going to start on the 3rd, I promise you, and OSI, by the way, has a money back guarantee on this. If you get through that course and you didn't love it, you just let us know. We'll give you your money back, 100% of it, no questions asked. That's how confident we are about this. So if you want to learn how to write, now is a great time to dive in. And you couldn't have a better instructor than John. He is the man behind the objective standard these days. So,
thanks, Craig. That reminds me. Didn't you get a letter from like a Christian philosophy professor who came across Loving Life and decided to use it to teach ethics?
I did. I'm not going to name him on the show here, but we've actually become friends. He lives not far from here, and he discovered my book. It was actually not Loving Life, it was Rational Egoism. Or did you say that?
No, I said Loving Life.
Oh, no. He found Rational Egoism, that book, and he loved it, and he was just astonished by how clear the arguments were and how they made sense. So he found my email and he emailed me and he said he thought I lived in Virginia, because TOS keeps its physical address in Virginia. And it turned out I was actually just, a couple hours from him. So we've gotten together for some coffee and have been talking, and he's super bright, and he loves these ideas. So I'm not sure where this is going to go, and I don't want to jump the gun on any of this, but he's fascinated by Rand, and in fact, I just received an email from him this morning. So we're going to be talking more. But yeah, this is the kind of thing that happens, right? You publish good, and that book, by the way, Rational Egoism, is a series of essays. That's a compilation of essays of mine from the objective standard. And all of these articles go through the same process over there, including mine. I don't know. Some people may think that, Craig's the guy who, does all the, just can sit down and write this stuff and it comes out all clear and coherent. That is not the case. All of my articles start out crappy, just like everybody else's articles start out crappy. That's what writing is. All good writing is crappy writing that has been rewritten and rewritten and rewritten until it becomes good writing. That's the process. So when I put together a compilation of essays like that, each of those essays has an enormous amount of work behind it. Enormous amount. All of my effort, all of my thinking, my trials and tribulations and failures and this, that, and the other. Then it goes to the editing team, and their job is to take off the gloves and beat it up, or they're fired. Right? You're no good to me if you're not gonna be critical. Right? So then they beat it up and send it back with all these things like this. I don't know why you're jumping to this point here, and this isn't sufficiently concretized, et cetera, et cetera. And it comes back to me, and then I have to say, oh my goodness, now back to the drawing board. But the point is that by the time these things get done, they've been through this process. And that's why TOS, and I think this is probably really our strong point there. I think we have a competitive advantage in the marketplace in this sphere, because we work so hard to ensure that these articles are crystal clear. And that's why that book had that effect on this minister and theologian. And that's why we get the kind of mail we do over there, right? People mail us all the time saying, thank you so much for this. But the big point here is that you can learn the process. You can learn the entire process that we do to produce these kinds of articles and these kinds of books when you put them together. We have a few people, by the way, writing for us right now. I'm not going to name their names because I don't want to jinx, so to speak, their projects. But one great thing you can do when you start writing regularly is you can start using your short writing projects as a means to write chapters or certain material for a book, right? And several people did this. John David Lewis wrote most of his book, No Substitute for Victory, thank you, by producing the articles first in TOS and getting our editing and our feedback and all of that. And several other people have done the same. So that's another thing you can do. People who want to write books, best way to write a book is to start writing articles that add up to that book, right? And so, if you're interested, dive in. John, can you tell people where to find information about this course you're getting ready to start?
Yeah, you can go to objectivestandard.org and click on courses. You can see all of our courses there. This one's starting on November 3rd, and we're actually already getting close to capacity. So if you're interested, register as soon as you can so you don't miss out. We keep the class size small because, like I said, we give a lot of one-on-one feedback, and we can only do that with so many people. So,
and you've got two cohorts, right? You're doing a morning and an evening class, or did you already say that?
Yep. No, I didn't say that. We're going to do a morning one and an evening one. The times are on there. They're in Pacific and I'm on Eastern, so I'm going to screw them up if I try to recall them right now. But you'll see them there on the site, objectivestandard.org. And if you missed this one, we're talking about the November 3rd, 2020 course. Maybe you're listening to this sometime in the future. This is a course that we're going to continue to have. So right. I'm sure if you missed this one, you'll be able to find another session of it.
But if it's not November 3rd yet, sign up quickly because I know those two courses are going to sell out. It looks like already. So, well, good. I'm glad we talked about this. The what goes on sort of behind the curtain at the Objective Standard has never been a secret. If people ask, we always tell them what we do. And I used to have writing meetings with all the people who were writing for us at different times to go through this stuff. But we've never formally brought it out as a writing course, and now that we have started this nonprofit, Objective Standard Institute, it gives us this ability to do that. And we've developed over 15 years this amazing writing process, and it just works, So it's a delight to be able to teach it over there, and I'm thrilled that you're going to be taking this course yourself this time around. So.
Yeah, same. So thanks for the opportunity, Craig. I hope you guys will join us. And until next time, keep loving life and fighting the good fight.
All right. Take care.